My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today we're going to talk about extending the life of legacy applications. These are the workhorses of your environment. In municipalities, you see a lot of very specialized ones that, they could be for planning purposes, Esri, Cityworks, things of that nature. And we want to get more users using them, and they're not going away, and they're not really broken or wrong, but we're struggling with the idea of, how do we get those users here? How do we do it safely? How do we expand these? How do we make sure they're reliable? So that's my agenda for today. We're going to talk about the current state of the world for the workhorse apps, who can use them, how, who can't use them, why, some of the risks, and how we're going to fix it. And as a hint, we're going to fix it with our technology, Agilicus NEX, which is a zero-trust product, and that allows the end user to sign in very simply from anywhere with single sign-in, regardless of who they work for, with no VPN. So I'm going to talk about the basic needs. These niche applications are used by either, there's two classes. They're either used by a small group of users, the planning department or bylaw, or a large group of users, timesheets or something like that. The latter category, it's interesting because there's a lot of constituents in it. So they could be, city staff, it could be temps, it could be people on short-term contract, long-term contract, it could be related parties. You could have a multi-level government where you have a region and you have a city. You could have a city and a library, which are kind of tied together. You could have a city and a utility, which are kind of tied together. And you could have something shared there. Again, timesheets, safety, LMS, something of that nature. And you have needs. You want to get 100% of those users able to use it on the device they have, which might not be the device that you provided, on the network they have, which might not be your network, wherever they are. So how do they use them today? Well, first of all, there's sort of two things in that. What is the connectivity and what is the device? So from a connectivity standpoint, you're going to be broken down in a set of categories. You can have things that are SaaS, that are managed by some third party, public IP, public sign-in. That's not really what we're talking about today. People are, Salesforce and things of that nature. They got their own ways of solving this problem, and they've done a great job. The second is you see a lot of sort of port forwards, reverse proxies, things that come back to the firewall. You run it in your own data center, and you've only really got a couple of public IPs, so you kind of, it runs on port 9000 or something like that, and you just port forward it back through it, or maybe you do it with host name routing, and this host name routes to that with a reverse proxy. Sometimes they're solely on premise, and the only way to get to them is the VPN. Either you're physically there or you get to it by the VPN. But when you get to the devices, you end up with this bit of a schmear. So you've got your city-issued laptop, your city-issued tablet and phone, but a lot of these users don't work for the city and they don't have an issued device. Or they have a more niche outside plant role where they don't really have a point in having a laptop issued. They don't have a desk. If you're driving a bus, where's your desk for your laptop? And in that case, they may prefer to have BYOD, or when it's a third party that's working with you, a vendor that's supporting you, an MSP, an upper tier, the libraries and on your Active Directory, they got their own devices. So the key that we want to solve is any application, any user, anytime. And that's what we define as sort of nirvana in this area. No, not the band, but for task-based workers, if you interview them and say, I'm going to shift your head into IT for a second, which is not something they normally think about, and say, what would you define as nirvana for IT? And really, they're going to say that I don't see it or hear of it or think of it. It's just not part of my life. I access the resources I need from where I am on the device I have using my existing account. I don't want new accounts and stuff. I just want to have single sign-on. So I want my email and my timesheet and entering data into Esri to look exactly the same. So any user, any application, any device, any network. That's what I want. So a lot of IT teams respond by noting that they've got a variety of applications and locations and networks and saying, okay, great. We're going to give you this thing called a VPN. It's been around for 30 years now, and it's perfect. It's a great example of how we solve the problem. So what is a VPN? Well, it's a really long Ethernet cable. You're really basically inviting them to have access to everything on that remote network. And it's perfect for people that have a really broad access need. So your IT staff that like the VPN are the ones that need to access everything. And it's all or nothing, it's on or off. I know you can put ACLs on and restrict a little bit, but it's really what it is. And it evolved from that concept of dial-up networking that some of you on the webinar will be old enough to remember, where you connected to a network. And it predates SaaS and cloud and all those other things. And it's conceived really around the singular company rule. My team VPNs to my building. That's what you think of. And you suddenly, when somebody says, well, those other workers, would you let them in the building unsupervised at night? Well, no, of course I wouldn't. Well, then why are you letting the VPN into the network? It's everything they have access to. No, it's just their application. Well, what do you mean it's just their application? Well, that's the only one that I think they use. Well, could they ping something else? Could they do a network scan? If they get a virus on their PC, is it going to walk around your network? And suddenly the VPN is troublesome. So the good side of that VPN connectivity is it just works. It's like being there. There's no additional steps once it's set up. You can leave it running forever. The transport is encrypted. You trust the vendor. No one ever got fired for deploying a VPN. That last statement's probably not as true anymore. There's certainly enough networks that have been hacked this way. A couple years ago, there was the Colonial Pipeline hack in the United States. One contractor, one virus, one VPN, and the gasoline supply of a G7 country's down. And that was a big deal. What's the bad part about the VPN? Well, it sometimes breaks things. So, imagine that you say to your partner, I know you don't work for me, and I know you got your own equipment, I didn't supply it, but I want you to install this software that I bought 10 years ago, and surely it's kept up to date, right? They don't want to do that. That MSP that supports you, they do not want your VPN because they support other clients. And they can't install everybody's VPN. The laptops would break. So what are they going to do? Create virtual machines for each customer? They don't like it. Your video call breaks up when the VPN is up. Why is that? Well, it's because you don't use split horizon tunneling, so all your traffic goes to the corporation and back out. So you get into a big Teams, Meet, Zoom, whatever call, and 100 people are on it, and their downstream is the upstream of the company, and their upstream is the downstream of the company. And suddenly you tested it with 2 people, it worked. You got 100 people on, 100 people with 3 megabits each, that's 300 megabits. You got 200 megabit connection, blah. Or they say, I can't print at home. That's the flip side of the problem. You're not using a split horizon VPN, and as a consequence, they can't reach local networks because everything goes to the company. It can't get back to your house. Sometimes they say, I use a tablet, or your VPN client's not available for my platform of choice, and you're like, suck it up, buttercup, you got to use my platform. And they're like, well, I don't work for you, and I don't have one of those, and this is what I got, and I work in a truck, or I'm a police officer in a car, and it's bolted to the console, and this is what it is. Oh, what if their subnets overlap with yours? You all picked RFC 1918 private IP space and IPv4, expecting IPv6 would never happen. You all have the same IP, 10 dot something, or 172 dot something, or 192 dot something. Well, your partners do too, and if that's the network they have on their device for their stuff and yours, then the VPN is a layer 3 technology. It can't deal with overlapping subnets. And then the last one, the number of times I see, I've created the vendor X account. I'm like, vendor X is a big company. Yeah. How many people work for vendor X? I don't know, a couple 100,000. So they got one account for you. Yep. That means they share it internally. Well, I guess so. Has anyone ever left that company on bad terms? Why do you ask? Well, they still got your password. You got one password for 2 people? No way. You should share your passwords with the same people you share your toothbrush. None. The ugly part about the VPN is it's connecting your network and their network. It's not just them that you're looking to trust, or even their laptop. It's everything around them. Their risk becomes your risk. It increases your risk envelope. What's the odds one of those people picks up a bad USB key in a parking lot or clicks on a phishing link or something? Their ransomware is now your ransomware. That's what you don't want. There have been a bunch of emergency directives recently from CISA on VPNs. They talk about specific issues with Palo Alto and Fortinet and so on. I'm not saying these are bad products. They're just not appropriate for every person, particularly these task-based workers. There's no fine-grained authentication. Again, you're just letting them into the entire network all the time. You don't want that. Don't panic, because the world's not ending. I'm here to talk to you about something that will fix this, which is called Zero-Trust. And Zero-Trust, it's been around for a few years now, and it's a principle. It's not a specific technology. You can't go buy one Zero-Trust, please, at the drive-thru. But it looks really big and complicated. It's actually really simple. So there's 3 problems to solve. The first is the who problem. Who are you? If I know who you are as an individual, which is called authentication, and you've proved it, without it being shared, then that's the first piece of the criteria. So I am Don, right? Whether I'm Don at Agillicus or something else, I'm still the same person. So you got to solve the who problem. The second problem is called the authorization. What or what? What are you allowed to do? So I know who you are. Now I know what you're allowed to do. Don is allowed to print on that printer. Don is allowed to see the learning management system. Don is not allowed anything else. And then the last part is called access, or how. How do I get you there? So if you have this solved on a per resource basis, so instead of it being my whole network, aka the VPN, instead it's that thing, that printer. Dawn is allowed to use that photocopier to do scanning to the network. Dawn is allowed to do this in Cityworks. If it's fine-grained like that, you have zero trust. Who, what, how, per resource. And the end user view is actually simpler. So the VPN is not bad. The VPN is really just at the beginning of your session, or more commonly, at the beginning of the life of your laptop, and just left up forever. You just start it and it logs in. The nice thing about Zero Trust is you can do multi-factor on a per resource basis. And you can put other things into that, like multi-factor kicks in when they're remote, or when they haven't used it in a few hours. And you can have that at different levels for different resources. Remote desktop for administrators, it's more frequent than the read-only wiki that you're less concerned about. The high-level end-user view is everything's web-based. They open a browser, they all have a browser. You got nothing to install there. And it doesn't matter whether it's a tablet, a phone, a Mac, a Windows, a Linux, a this, a that, the other thing. As long as it's a little bit newer than a Commodore 64, you're going to be good to go on having a browser. And they use their existing company login. It's single sign-on with their existing credentials. There's no credentials in our system. They sign in just like they're signing into Office 365 or Google services. It's just click, boom, in, but you own the authorization. So your vendor signs in, your team signs in, that other regional government that you work with or library, they sign in with their credentials, which they manage. And if they get fired, they get taken out of their system, and it all just works. But you control what they're allowed to do. And you can say, oh, you can have a read-only view to the HMI in our SCADA wastewater plant. And it's really, really ideal for these narrow task-based workers. So they just have to open a browser, click on an icon, resource A, boom, it's open, resource B, it's open, I'm done. And they don't have to worry about bringing up the VPN and changing their IP, or running a virtual machine, or having a different username and password, or overlapping IPs and not being able to print at home, or their video calls breaking up. We're going to do a really short demo here, and we do that by what's going on with my demo? All right, here we are. I pre-recorded the demo because sometimes they break, and I don't like that when I'm talking live. But you saw there the user was able to sign in with their single sign-on credentials and immediately have access to this wastewater treatment plant HMI. They can launch it directly in the browser, VNC. These are legacy applications. Sometimes they're desktop-based. You still got Esri installed on site. You need a contractor to update a bunch of data points. Sometimes it's a pay stub system or something of that nature. I didn't show the multi-factor sign in here, but we also have this concept of desktop integration. Some people like things on their start menu, particularly when it's a fat client, it's not browser-based. They like it to open there. I've opened VNC natively, and you can see I've just brought it in as the native application, and those eyes are moving around to follow you hypnotically. And then that's sort of the end of the demo. So then now I have to remember how to undo the demo. Here we are. So why does this reduce risks? A lot of people are like, look, it's just another way of remote access. Remote access is the intrinsic risk. The answer is no. There's a bunch of risks that you currently have that Zero Trust has solved for you. So the first is shared accounts. I guarantee you, if you dig under the covers, somewhere in your organization, you got a username and password that is known by more than one person. And it might be on a complicated device. I'm not talking about your Windows Active Directory machines. I'm talking about your router, your phone switch, your this, that, your other thing. And nobody really knows what would happen if you change it, and nobody really knows how many people have it. And there's people that no longer work for your organization that have that. This is bad risk. You don't want to fess up to your insurance company. Hey, we're not really sure how many people have the password to this, but it's a lot. There was a recent scan done by CISA across the various critical infrastructure in the United States, and the number one vector of bad things happening was valid accounts. So they were stale, nobody was using it anymore, we'd forgotten, it was shared, it had a weak password, it was a valid account. It's not some intrepid super hacker finding a way to do a Stack Overflow and this and that and reverse engineering your application. They're just guessing a password and typing it in. There's no multi-factor. Zero Trust gets rid of that overbroad access. Instead of it being an Ethernet cable to your building and they've got access to everything and you're not around, the blast radius is now the single systems that you've given access to. And there's an audit trail. That audit trail reduces the risk a lot because it means that people won't purposely try to use things that they shouldn't. But also when something bad happens, you know how much further they got, you know where you have to go start looking. You can enforce multi-factor on everyone. And right now it's a little tough to do multi-factor for people that aren't part of your organization. How do you know their identity provider does it? Well, I'm going to create a shared account. Oh, and we just talked about shared accounts. Okay, shadow accounts. Contractor-A, contractor-B, and bring them all in mine. Well, now I'm paying more on my Active Directory licenses, and they don't want my multi-factor because they get their own method of doing it, and they're tired. Multi-factor fatigue sets in. They don't like it. Removing the VPN means only the resource and its network protocol are accessible. You don't have to worry about somebody plugging a bad USB key in that laptop that's remote. It can't get onto your network. It might get into that application, I suppose, but nothing else. There's no software to install. So a lot of people are like, this sounds great, but you're talking about retooling a municipal network, and my team is approximately 1/8 of one person that only shows up on Mondays, and we're busy until 3 decades from now, and it looks like we're gonna never finish this. I'm like, no, you can get this done. Even in the time it took us to do this call, this webinar, you could have been live. It's much simpler because it works as a reverse proxy. There's no reconfiguration of those applications. 1, 2, 3, sign up to our product, install one connector, create your first share, your first remote desktop, your first this, your first that, and boom, it's in the hands of a user. And then those users don't need new usernames and passwords. There's nothing to train them on. It works with Microsoft, Google, Okta, all of those, Yahoo, LinkedIn, a bunch of different things. All you have to do is create a rule saying users in this group can do this thing. Bingo, bango, you're done. And it's seamless access for them. They have no software to install. They're good to go. So you can get this done in hours, not days. Days, not weeks. So my call to arms, my call to action, you, the great audience, is first is recognize that there are these digitally disenfranchised people, the growing underserved. Again, we're not talking about people that work directly in the office in IT that have access to everything. We're talking about the person who works as a lifeguard at your pool for 4 Saturdays in the summer. They are not particularly well served digitally. They are not particularly well served digitally for a set of reasons, but one of them is you have these legacy applications that are really doing a good job and aren't getting replaced anytime soon, but they're not tooled in for somebody to use BYOD with no network somewhere else. And reaching them and making them more efficient in their job is going to make everybody happier. And when everybody's happier, the world's a better place. So things are getting smarter and more specialized. There's more stuff going online. That wastewater treatment plant, it used to be that it had nothing related to internet there and just people showed up in a truck. And now suddenly you've got a brand new type of HMI that's got online licensing, and you've got remote site access, which has cameras and smart locks that need something. And suddenly that air gap is a bit of a Swiss cheese there. You've got long-lived applications like Cityworks that are running on a machine that you're happy with, but you'd have to VPN people there, and this fixes all that. Proper TLS certificate on the SSL certificate front. There's a move afoot to move that to a 45-day maximum. So right now it's a year or 3 years, depending on your platform. But think about how you would struggle if you had to be encrypted properly with a real certificate and 45 days or less. I mean, you're changing it every half of that, so 15, 30 days. Our system will do all that for you. Getting rid of that lateral traversal, because it's very costly if somebody can get into one thing in your network and then walk sideways. And that's really what that CISA report was all about. They did this root vulnerability analysis. They cross-joined it with MITRE, and they looked. The vast majority of it is they get into one weak system that everybody's forgotten, which has a shared account or is a valid account, and then from there. There's attacks like pass the hash. They're able to walk sideways and get into real systems and up level until eventually they own your network and you don't. I want you to understand that VPN is not an appropriate solution for everybody. I'm not here to say the VPN is the worst thing that's ever been invented. I think that's the Microsoft Zune. But instead, it's just not the right answer for everybody. You know, that lifeguard that's working the pool in the summer, that contractor that's helping you out with this and that, the bylaw people in the street, it's not a right answer for them. So they won't install your software, or their device doesn't support it. There's a bunch of reasons we talked about. And then I want you to also understand that single sign-on multi-factor needs to be for everybody. It's not just my staff or admins. The number of people I say, look, we got multi-factor for privileged things. Like, no, you need multi-factor for everything. I don't care if you're checking out a library book or you're hitting the launch codes for the nuclear, because one of them can get to the other because of lateral traversal. Multi-factor, any two or more of something you have, it's so hard to crack. And it's so easy to implement with a platform like ours. There's no reason not to have it on for one of those legacy applications. If you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, reach out to me. My team's going to reach out to you after this. You can give me an email, don@agilicus.com, and say, thanks for the insight, or your joke about the Zune hit home. I'm sad I spent money on it, or whatever. But I'd love to hear from you. And with that, seeing no questions, I will sign off. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus. My product is Agilicus NEX. And we think we can make it really simple for you to extend the life of those really strong niche municipal applications. Give us a call. Thanks.